sperm count. We had been married for 8 years. I had been pregnant twice, but both pregnancies ended in miscarriage. My health wasn't good to begin with, and the back-to-back miscarriages caused significant damage to my body. After talking it over with David, I had an IUD inserted. A year later, David came home holding the child of his distant cousin, a boy who had lost his parents. I raised that boy like he was my own precious jewel. I gave him everything I had, poured all my love and effort into raising him into a capable man. I bought him an apartment in a Tier 1 city, helped him marry a wife, raised his child, our grandchild, and worked myself sick in the process. But in the end, he not only refused to pay for my medical treatment, he even brought his biological mother with him to visit me when I was terminally ill. And right then, he casually told me that he wasn't adopted. He was David's biological son. I was so shocked and angry I couldn't catch my breath. I died with hatred and resentment in my heart. But heaven saw everything. It didn't let me reincarnate. It brought me back to life. I was reborn on the very day David brought home that illegitimate child. Fine then. Let him bring the kid home. Let's see how I raise him this time. Let's see how much money is left in the savings account. Sure, people say they expect nothing in return. They only handed the child over to us because they couldn't afford to raise him. But that doesn't mean we should give endlessly out of kindness. Even if he's just a kid, there should be something, even a little, right? I smiled slightly and nodded, saying, exactly. No one carries a baby for 10 months just to give it away for free. Even if you hadn't said anything, I would have insisted on something. That was my answer in my past life, and it's still my answer now. David smiled. I knew you were the most sensible one. I responded calmly. I understand the reasoning, but we really don't have much money left. David frowned in disbelief. Didn't we just check the account before the new year? There was still plenty in there. Well, the account with money is mine. I took another savings book from the wardrobe. This one's yours. Take a look and see how much is left. What do you mean, yours and mine? All these years we've been married, you've never had to spend a dime on household expenses. When did I ever say you used my money to get married? We're a family. Why draw lines between yours and mine? I married you, and that means I get to eat and wear clothes. If I spend your money, that's natural. What, you think you should be spending mine instead? What does that make you, some freeloader? A pretty little leech living off a woman? I snapped back at him. David slammed the cup in his hand down hard on the table. What kind of nonsense is that? I shrugged, unconcerned. I'm a woman. I don't have to carry on the family line. Having a child is fine. Not having one is also fine. That's how you feel now, David said, trying to reason with me. But people get old. You have to think about the future. Kids are supposed to take care of you when you're old. We'll deal with the future when it comes, I replied. But right now, I really don't want to spend my own money raising someone else's child. What do you mean someone else's child? He's already been brought home. He's our son now. He's going to call us mom and dad. A child that comes out of my womb is my child. One that came out of someone else's womb? I don't want it. But didn't we already agree to this? David said. I changed my mind. Is that not allowed? Then you should have said something earlier. The kid's already born. How can we back out now? It's not like I promised to pay for anything. I was still thinking it over. I never said I would. Only that I'd decide once I saw the baby. But we already told them we'd take him. So now, come on, give me the money. Just treat it like a loan, okay? David said reluctantly. I'm afraid not, I said. We've already paid the deposit on the cooperative housing. If you use that money, what are we going to use to pay the rest? You already paid the deposit? Didn't I say we should wait? Wait for what? The allocation phase is over. Now they're building co-op housing. Wait any longer, and there won't be anything left. The deposit is already paid. Every time I thought about the co-op housing, I felt so bitter. In my past life, whatever David said went. I gave him all my money without hesitation, didn't even hold back enough to secure our own future. I gave up the deposit, gave up the chance to get a house through the co-op system. As a result, we missed the last wave of housing subsidies. Later, not only did we have to raise a child, we also had to regularly support David's cousin's wife, the one who claimed we owed her a great favor. By the time we finally had some money saved up, housing prices had already skyrocketed. In order to buy a home, I taught classes during the day and secretly tutored students on nights and weekends, even on holidays, just to earn extra income. In the end, I lost my government job because of it. What made me even more furious was that woman. In my past life, she stood next to my sickbed, pretending to pity me while actually brimming with pride. She said, "Sister-in-law, thank you for everything over these years. If you hadn't taken out your salary from over a decade of work, David wouldn't have had the money to set me up with a shop. If you hadn't kept using your salary afterward to support the household and raise the child, David wouldn't have had the spare funds to help me. It's a shame good people don't live long." That's how I died, from pure rage. So all those years I spent choking on chalk dust as a teacher, it was just to benefit that shameless couple and their illegitimate child? I swear I could have eaten their hearts alive. If they think they'll ever get another penny out of me in this life, they're dreaming. David had originally been allocated a small plot of land, just over an acre. Later, after he went to college, his residence registration was moved to the city, and the land was transferred to his younger brother. Now, David wanted me to go back to his old workplace and return some benefits. I refused. There wasn't much money left in David's account, and he was too embarrassed to face that woman with empty hands. So the only thing he could offer was that 1-acre plot of land to make up for it. But his younger brother had long since considered that land his, and he wasn't about to just give it up. Still, he didn't dare openly go against David, so his wife came to find me instead. She complained, "Why should something that belongs to our family be handed over to someone else? If you two wanted a child, we could have given you one of ours. Why did it have to be someone else's? If we'd known, it wouldn't have come to this, their child getting to live it up in the city. Like that was up to me. If it were my decision, of course, I would have preferred to take a child from within the family. First, it would have lessened the burden on all of us and helped everyone move forward. Second, the child would have at least shared our blood. No matter how much money we spent raising him, it wouldn't feel like a loss. Third, raising a child like that would have only made the bond between the brothers even stronger. The elders would have been pleased too." "Exactly," she said. "That's why I say you're smart, educated, and clear-headed." I understand the logic too, but I didn't get a say in it. Of course, we didn't want to give our child to strangers either. Splitting up flesh and blood like that is heartless. This was your husband's decision. His cousin passed away, and there were already several other children in the family. They couldn't raise another one. David made the call, and I thought it made sense at the time. So we went along with it. "What are you talking about?" I said, amused by her attempt at moral high ground. "The kid's being raised by his own family. You'll still see him every holiday. How's that separating flesh and blood?" She shot back, "That's what I'm saying too. At most, he'll just have 2 dads and 2 moms. But then we started thinking, with the one-child policy these days, every kid is precious unless someone's desperate for a boy. Who's really willing to give one up? Not many women like my sister-in-law. She got an IUD and still ended up pregnant every year. That's rare. But we're willing," she added, "not for any other reason, just for the child's sake. A kid raised in the city will always be brought up better than one in the countryside. And with parents like you two, so capable and successful, the child's future is bound to be bright. Sister-in-law, why don't you go talk to David? Have him return the child and take one from our family instead. We're not lacking for sons, we have 2, and we're not attached to either." "I can't talk him into it," I said calmly. "If you want to convince him, find someone else to do it. As long as he agrees, I'll fully support it." I sat back like I was watching a play, more than happy to let the drama unfold. "I wouldn't dare," she said quickly. "But maybe I can get your in-laws to talk to him. That's your call." "Go ahead, try it," I replied with a smirk. The very next day, after she returned home, my father and mother-in-law came to the city. My father-in-law tried to appeal to David through the bond of blood and kinship. My mother-in-law emphasized the love between brothers, hoping to sway their son's decision and get David to return his cousin's child and replace him with his younger brother's son instead. But David stood firm. He refused to agree. They said it would be heartless to do such a thing. To go back on it now would dishonor David's late cousin. I stood to the side, amused. Oh, right. Cheating someone, betraying them, that's not heartless? That's totally respectable, I suppose. Such noble-sounding reasons. Such righteously fake people. I didn't interfere. Just sat back and watched how this charming little family would wrap up their mess. In my previous life, David had grown close to that wretched woman. My in-laws weren't happy about it, but they couldn't bear to scold their son. So they turned their blame on me, mocking me in public and behind closed doors for not being capable enough to keep the house in order. Fine, let them see now just how competent their golden son really is. After exhausting themselves trying to talk David down, my father and mother-in-law turned to me. "Why don't you try persuading him too?" they asked. "I have nothing to say," I replied. "Either way, it's not my child, but if it were his brother's kid, then fine, we'd raise him. At least we wouldn't be handing over land and money to outsiders. Even if we did, at least it would stay in the family." "That's exactly what I'm saying," my mother-in-law nodded eagerly. "You see how understanding your wife is? Why are you being so stubborn?" "I just know one thing," David replied righteously. "A person should never go back on their word. If you make a promise, you keep it." In the end, his parents couldn't convince him. All that effort for nothing. I had expected this outcome from the start, so I wasn't disappointed. Besides, I had already gotten what I wanted, the child's fingernail clippings. These past few days I'd been thinking non-stop. After being used and humiliated for most of my life, what would truly give me peace? Should I twist the kid slowly over time, raising him wrong just to spite them? Or should I act swiftly and catch David cheating, then force him out of the marriage with nothing? Or maybe I should raise the kid for a few years, twist him just enough, and then expose David's affair, booting him out clean while leaving him with a broken child. My thoughts churned endlessly, making it impossible to find peace. At my most hateful, I even thought about gathering the whole family, knocking them unconscious, turning on the gas, and ending it all together. These thoughts turned in my head day and night, driving me mad. One night, I wrapped my hands around the child's neck. I hated him so much, more than David, more than that woman. I hated him, this boy I had raised with my own hands. But just as I was about to squeeze, the child let out a laugh in his sleep, soft, innocent, pure. I don't know why, but suddenly I remembered so many moments from my past life. How he once called me mommy in that sweet baby voice. How he used to cling to me, giggling and begging to be held. How he'd pick wildflowers by the roadside and give them to me like treasures. How he once tried, awkwardly but earnestly, to bake me a cake. This child had once loved me deeply. And in raising him I had known real joy. But somewhere along the way, something had changed. When did he start hating me? Hating me enough to watch me suffer through illness with cold eyes? Hating me enough to let me die in agony? Since my rebirth, the one I hated most wasn't David. It wasn't that woman. It was the child I had raised myself. The one I had loved like my own flesh and blood. I had poured my soul into him. So his betrayal had cut the deepest. My grip on his neck tightened, then loosened, then tightened again. I couldn't bring myself to do it, but the moment had already passed. The child woke up crying, wailing loudly. I snapped out of it, as if waking from a nightmare. "Why is the baby crying?" David asked, walking over with a smile. "Still not used to the job, huh, Mom? Then maybe you should find someone more qualified," I shot back, giving him a sharp look. "I was just joking. No need to get so tense," he said quickly. "You're going to scare the baby worse than I did." Seeing my sour expression, David immediately tried to change the subject. "I've picked out some baby names," he said, handing me a piece of paper. "Take a look and tell me which one you like best." He leaned in, explaining each name. Mason, bright and steady, a shining future. Caleb, open-hearted, destined for greatness. Logan, strong and commanding, a pillar of the nation. Asher, thriving and wise, a life free of worry. Ethan, rooted in the classics, upright and principled. Miles, dignified and restrained, with talent to shape the world. The same names as before. In my past life and now in this one, all the same. Back then David had chosen Mason, hoping the boy would live a smooth and successful life. I too had chosen that name, wishing him a bright future. But it turned out that brilliant future had been built from the ashes of my own. If I were truly his mother, or if he had genuinely seen me as his mother, then all of it would have been right and justified. But thinking about that only reignited my anger. I sneered coldly. So now you've fully embraced your role as the noble savior of the clan, huh? Tell me, have you brought over your salary passbook yet? Have you even contributed a dime to this household? David frowned tightly and hesitated before speaking. Can you cover the expenses for the next 2 months in the countryside? It's always tight around the new year. So many obligations, so many places to spend. You know how things are with my cousin's family. If I don't help, they really won't make it through the season. I couldn't help but laugh bitterly. So it's hard this year, and next year it won't be. What about the year after that? Just New Year's is tough. What about the other holidays? Spring semester? Fall semester? Are those free? What exactly did you bring home? A child or a living Buddha? And even if it were a living Buddha, people only go burn incense once a year on their birthday. But you? You're offering up tribute daily. I couldn't help mocking him. In my last life, once the child came into our home, half of David's salary went straight into his birth mother's black hole of a household. At first, I felt sympathetic, but then things got harder and harder for us, while everyone around us seemed to be living better and better. That's when the resentment started. And once resentment takes root, and you can't find a way to resolve it, the anger just builds. Day after day, it smolders hotter and deeper. And as that anger grows, it eats away at everything. The bond between husband and wife, the affection between mother and child. David had no way to ask for the money back, but this time I used it as an excuse. We got into a huge fight. I packed a bag and walked out. Besides toiletries and daily essentials, I took 3 important things: the child's nail clippings, a lock of David's hair, and my savings passbook. I was going to Shanghai. First, to go to a reputable hospital for a paternity test. Second, to make a fortune. In my past life, during the brief days I wasn't buried in pain, I had followed a drama where the protagonist made their first pot of gold through stock subscription certificates. The way the money multiplied, the speed of profit, it stunned me. Out of curiosity, I'd gone online to research it. I used to believe that if I didn't manage money, money wouldn't manage me either. But after learning about the development of our country's stock market, I realized just how massive an opportunity I had missed. I wouldn't let that happen again. This time, I would seize the financial windfall brought on by our country's rapid economic growth. Once I got to Shanghai, I went straight to the hospital and completed the paternity test procedures. Then I paid someone, a local woman, to help me purchase anonymous stock subscription certificates from a bank. At that time, people still hadn't realized the value of those certificates. Few were willing to spend money on them. The banks were pushing hard to promote them. The woman I hired lied to the bank staff, saying she was buying them as return gifts for guests at a birthday banquet. They agreed not to fill in any personal identification. Just like that, a complete outsider like me managed to easily grab onto a golden opportunity meant only for Shanghai locals. In my previous life, I also lived in Shanghai for 4 or 5 years. But I spent my days caring for grandchildren, cooking, cleaning, and my nights working part-time at childcare centers to supplement the household income. I never got the chance to truly enjoy the city. This time, I stayed for a week. I ate what I wanted. I went where I wanted. I spent almost all my money before I went back. That would have been unimaginable in the past. It's not that I was stingy, but from the time I graduated at 18 and started working, all the way until the day I died, I'd drawn a salary for 3 or 4 decades and never once treated myself properly. My mother had always taught me, money must be spent wisely, on building a family, raising children. There would always be plenty of places to spend. What's the point of food, fun, or new clothes, she'd say. You're happy for a moment, and then it's gone. Anytime I spent money, she'd murmur like a ghost by my side, money on the road to the afterlife doesn't come easy. If you weren't bitter in life, how could you have earned it? Or she'd say, making money is like digging with a needle. Spending it is like sand washed away by water. Sometimes I'd buy myself a nice dress, proud and cheerful, And she'd flip through my whole wardrobe until she found something similar from last season and throw it at me, asking, "What? You don't have anything to wear?" I wore the same pieces for 10, even 20 years, too reluctant to replace them. Whenever I treated my friends to a meal, my mom would throw a fit, slamming things, yelling, and then complaining to the whole family. The entire household would gang up on me with cold stares. My dad would ask how much I had spent and then scoff, "Even if you earn $1,000 a month, it's still not enough for you." With Mom's constant preaching, day in and day out, I became afraid to spend money, even when I wanted to. Even after I got married, when Mom no longer had control over me, it was still the same. I don't know when it started, but spending money began to feel like a sin. And if I did spend money, I had to spend it on everyone, not just myself. If I bought clothes for myself, I had to buy for everyone, young and old. If I wanted a special meal, I had to pack it up and bring it home to share. At times like that, my mom would mutter about wasting money, but she'd be smiling. So, I pushed myself to earn more. I tutored students over the holidays, wrote articles at night to submit to magazines, all so that I could still stash away my paycheck while dressing myself decently, maybe enjoying a nice meal once in a while. Of course, going on vacation was out of the question. I could never afford the cost of travel for both my family and my in-laws. In my past life, my son and daughter-in-law would travel all the time. They never brought their child, and certainly never brought us. I used to envy them, and not understand. How could people live like that, so carefree? But now I realize, why shouldn't they live like that? My previous life, I burned myself out like a light bulb for others. I was like an elephant, tied to a thin rope since childhood. And by the time I could finally break free, I had forgotten how. Or maybe, I was just too scared to try. Even now, in this second life, I was still afraid that if I went away for a few days of fun, I'd have to explain myself to the whole family. So I chose to reveal the paternity test results, to tell them that David had secretly fathered a child with another woman, just so they wouldn't blame me for leaving everyone behind to go off on my own. My mom clutched the report and cried. My dad stood in silence, puffing hard on a cigarette. My older brother shouted that he was going to go kill David. My sister turned to me and asked what I planned to do. "I'm getting a divorce," I said. That shut my mom up real fast. She stopped crying and began lecturing me instead. "Nobody's marriage is perfect," she said. "You've been married for so many years and never had a child. David's been more than tolerant of you. What more do you want?" Even my dad, usually quiet, chimed in between puffs. "A pot's best with its original lid. A good marriage is one that lasts. A good woman needs someone to rely on. Switch to someone else, and it might not be any better." Suddenly, my brother decided to be practical. "Your health isn't good," he said bluntly. "Even if you remarry, who's to say you'll be able to have a kid? Honestly, you should just let it go." My sister nodded. "Giving birth takes a toll on the body. With your health, you're lucky to get a free son handed to you. A free son. As if that were some kind of cosmic bargain." "What a joke," I snapped. "If it's such a great deal, why don't we have your husband go knock someone up too, so you can enjoy the same benefit?" They were all just afraid that my divorce would cause trouble for the family. Each of them had their own motives. The moment I pushed back, they got worked up. "Listen to yourself," my brother barked. "We're only thinking of your health. Don't bite the hand that feeds you." "Well, I don't need that kind of kindness," I fired back. "I'm not raising someone else's bastard. If you could have your own kid, none of this would be happening," he snapped, stabbing right at my deepest wound. I refused to let it go. "And who says I can't? Just because David couldn't father a child doesn't mean I couldn't. He can go find someone who can get pregnant, and I'll go find a man who's actually fertile." "You think it's that easy to remarry at your age?" my brother scoffed. "What, you think you'll find someone perfect with no kids of his own? If he's single at that age, he's either broke or there's something seriously wrong with him." My dad glared at my mom and joined in again. "Everything in life is fate," he said. "If this is what your life handed you, just accept it. If David kept it from you, it's because he still cares. Just pretend you never found out. If you don't want to raise the kid, then just keep your distance. As long as you don't mistreat him, that's good enough." The most important thing is to hold on to the family's money. That's the only way you won't lose out. Hold on to the family's money? What a joke, as if that money was still ours. David had already used the tight financial situation around New Year's to take his entire month's salary out of the account. And that was only the beginning. As long as that child stayed in the picture, he would always be their leverage. And this wouldn't be the last time I'd be expected to chip in. If life went on like this, it wouldn't just be the family funds they had their eyes on. They'd start coveting my money too. Sure enough, right after David handed over his salary, they turned to mine, asking me to support the household. That's why I blew up at him in the first place, because this time, he really had no leg to stand on. If David just stops giving them money, wouldn't that solve the problem? My dad asked, like it was that simple. My mom, ever the optimist, still clung to fantasy. They've got nothing to lose, she said. David's the one with a career. If he makes a mistake, it's him who'll suffer. Does he really want to risk his job? My dad sighed, frustrated. It's always about money. Once it comes to that, marriage problems don't even matter anymore. In my parents' eyes, if I couldn't use my marriage to gain something for the family, or worse, if I had to give instead, then that marriage was worthless. In my last life, I didn't get divorced. Instead, I spent money and effort raising someone else's child alongside David. Because of that, I had less to give my own family, less time, less money. So they started whispering behind my back, saying I was wasting all my energy on a child that wasn't even mine, saying they didn't see the point. Honestly, there really was no point. Raising someone else's child was thankless. Bending over backward for my birth family was even more so. In their eyes, the ideal version of me was someone who gave endlessly, never complained, never asked for help, just sacrificed, silently and selflessly. And if I didn't cause them any trouble, that was the best version of me. Honestly, even David treated me better than they did. He might not have been a good man, but at least when I came home, he didn't interrogate me. He just bought a basket of groceries and made a nice meal. He said, "I've left the kid with my parents for now. Once he's old enough for preschool, we'll bring him back." As for my salary, he suggested dividing it into thirds. One portion for our household, one for my parents as compensation, and one for their side. That way, he said, everyone's taken care of. I let out a cold laugh. You think 1/3 of a salary is enough to support a whole household? Fine. I'll follow your lead. I'll write some articles, submit to some magazines, maybe something will come of it. You think that'll work? At least this was better than what happened last time. In my previous life, David brought his parents into the city to help raise the child. He split his salary in half. One part for us, the other for that woman. Half a salary isn't much more than 1/3, but now there were 2 more mouths to feed. Life became miserable. Worse still, whenever David came home, he only had eyes for that boy. Never once did it cross his mind to pick up side gigs or earn extra cash. So when the money ran short, I was the one constantly filling the gap. If he had shown even half the effort back then that he was showing now, maybe I wouldn't have harbored so much resentment. But now I just felt even more bitter. So he could have handled things better. He just didn't, because I never made a fuss. He figured I was a fool. But in this life, I didn't want to be anyone's fool. I laid the paternity test results in front of him. "The child is yours, right?" I asked. "Do you think you've been fair to me? Fair to your cousin?" David's face darkened. He wiped his hand over his face, then let out a long sigh. "So, you found out you went to Shanghai to get this done." I didn't answer. I just stared at him coldly. "What do you want to do?" he asked. "I want a divorce," I said. "As for assets, the money in our shared account stays with me. The housing allocations, they're under both our names, but if we're divorcing, I'll have no home. Those are mine too." David saw how calm I was and realized there was no room left to negotiate. He didn't try to make excuses, didn't even beg. He just said, "The co-op housing is about to be assigned. This current apartment will be taken back. Can you talk to someone and exchange it for 2 one-bedroom units, one for each of us?" "Did you forget?" I said. "The 3,000 yuan down payment for the co-op housing came out of my pocket. You got 7,000 more lying around to cover the rest?" David looked at me, half begging, half threatening. We've been married for so many years. Do you really have to be this ruthless? I couldn't help but laugh, not from amusement, but from how absurd it was. We've been married for years, and I'm the one being ruthless? You got someone else pregnant behind my back. Lied about adopting your cousin's kid. I spent half a lifetime slaving away for that illegitimate child in my last life. If I really wanted to be ruthless, I would have sent the paternity report directly to your workplace. I actually showed you mercy. David tried again. Shuyun, in all our years of marriage, aside from this one mistake, I haven't done anything to wrong you. One mistake? I snapped. Isn't one enough? What, you want to keep wronging me until I break? You expect me to raise your love child like he's my own? Be the good wife, good mom, spending money and time, while you sit back and play the part of the noble man? Go to sleep, David. Dream all you want. You'll find it there. Maybe my words hit a little too close to home. David finally realized I'd seen through his plan and made up my mind. There was no more room for negotiation. He signed the divorce papers cleanly and quickly. Didn't try to talk his way out, didn't beg, didn't stall. He had only one request. Please, just don't tell anyone about the kid's real identity. I agreed. After we collected the divorce certificate, I told him, my family already knows about the child. If you're smart, you'll disappear from my life, for good. Don't give me a single reason to come after you. I won't say anything publicly, but if my family speaks out on my behalf, I won't be stopping them. And just like that, we were divorced. David packed up his things and moved out. I heard he went back to his parents' house. We didn't make our divorce public. I needed to protect the co-op housing opportunity, and David probably wanted to protect his reputation. We separated quietly, without a ripple. But David's parents must have known. If we had just been fighting, they would have come to mediate. The fact that they stayed away said it all. They likely even knew the child was David's. Otherwise, knowing how controlling his family was, they never would have let me walk away with the property. Just like that, things seemed to settle. During the new year, I visited relatives as usual. When people asked where David was, I simply said he was busy. No one suspected a divorce. They just assumed we had a fight. As for my parents, I told them the truth, but made them promise to keep quiet. That way, both sides stayed in peace, and life flowed on like water, steady and uneventful. I stayed home alone, reading books, writing articles, doing crafts. It was quiet, maybe even a little boring, but fulfilling all the same. Before I knew it, the New Year holiday passed, and winter break was nearly over. My workplace had given us extra time to raise funds. When school resumed, we'd need to pay the remaining balance on the co-op housing. I knew the stock subscription certificates would continue to increase in value, but I also knew that no one was going to lend me the rest of the money. So I went back to Shanghai. I sold one stock subscription certificate for 30,000 yuan. I knew it would be worth much more in the future, but my obsession with this co-op apartment ran deeper than profit. In my last life, everything went downhill after I lost this apartment. If I had just held on to my own savings book and not given it to David, I could have at least owned this 2-bedroom place. I wouldn't have had to squeeze into one tiny room with my mother-in-law who had come to help with the child. I wouldn't have been so stressed that I couldn't write a single word. If I'd kept the apartment, I could have earned real money while I was still able to write. Maybe I wouldn't have spent my later years endlessly toiling just to survive. In this life, my turning point would begin with this apartment. Even if I had to lose money to get it, I would accept it happily. When I finally paid off the balance, I felt as though the sky opened up. The air clear, clouds wide and high. My body and mind felt light and free. This was the first home I ever owned, and it wouldn't be the last. I would own many homes. I would have more rent money than I could ever spend. From that moment on, my life would change completely. But I still lived as simply as ever. I went to work, came home, cooked, ate, I wore ordinary clothes, lived an ordinary life. No one knew that I now owned 10 apartments and 10 storefronts in Puxi. Right after I sold off all my stock subscription certificates, I allowed myself one moment of indulgence. After the co-op apartment was officially handed over, I spent 5,000 yuan on renovations. At a time when the average monthly salary barely exceeded 100 yuan, that kind of spending definitely made waves. Naturally, it got people talking. Some started showing concern about my relationship status. "Hey, haven't seen your husband picking you up from work lately?" someone asked. "He's busy," I replied flatly. But that kind of cover didn't last long. It said that between any two strangers, there are only 5 degrees of separation. In a small city like ours, where everyone's connected in one way or another, gossip spreads even faster. More importantly, when the new place was delivered and renovated, I was the only one running around taking care of everything. That alone gave people plenty to whisper about. Once everything settled and the rumors spiraled out of control, I saw no point in hiding anymore. Calmly, I told them the truth. David and I had separated. We were divorced. "Was it because of the child?" someone asked. "Maybe, maybe not," I said vaguely. "So, he gave you the apartment?" "His salary barely covered the basics," I replied matter-of-factly. "This apartment was bought with my money. If I didn't keep it, who should have? I couldn't have afforded a place this size on my own salary. Let's just say it was his way of making it up to me." I didn't feel guilty at all. I'd earned it. The day I moved into my new home, David got remarried. He actually came to see me the night before, saying, "You were played." I raised my eyebrows. David, who had schemed and calculated his whole life, was now trying to tell me he'd been outsmarted? "I figured," he said, "if we couldn't have kids, then fine. Life goes on." But my parents wouldn't let it go. They kept saying, "Even if you're alone, you should leave something behind. Otherwise, when you're gone, who'll burn incense for you?" I couldn't help but laugh out loud. The sound was full of scorn. David looked embarrassed but continued, "You hear something once, you brush it off. But when you hear it 100 times, it starts to stick. Especially coming home from work, seeing all the neighborhood kids rushing into their father's arms yelling 'Daddy' from down the street. I don't know. I got jealous." "I was jealous too," I said. "Jealous of moms." "Yeah," he said softly. "Who wouldn't want a child?" "I get it," I replied. "I was possessed too for a while." Then he told me how his cousin, the child's biological father, got down on his knees, begging him to take the boy. "As long as the land's fertile," his cousin said, "even if the seed's not perfect, the harvest will still come." I had nothing left to say. That was when I finally understood. All those times my parents pushed me about having a child, it wasn't really their idea. It was David's cousin's parents, whispering through the grapevine. Telling my parents that, no matter how smart or rich I was worthless without a child. My parents had been trying to convince me to raise my brother's kid. They didn't want to say it directly, worried it would damage family ties. So they danced around it. In the end, it was one family trying to outmaneuver another. And they all miscalculated. But I've come to understand something. If your heart isn't open to manipulation, no one can take advantage of you. "Stop pretending," I said to David. "You just wanted a child of your own. You were willing to betray love, marriage, even the law to get it." He didn't deny it. "Men, we're obsessed with continuing the bloodline." "Well," I said, "now you've got what you wanted. So why are you still complaining?" "Oh, because what you gained isn't worth what you lost." "That kid," I added, "he's leverage to me, and to them, he's leverage too. You're caught in the middle." I smiled and added, "Anyway, congratulations on your second marriage. May your days be filled with love and may your children come in flocks." I paused dramatically. "You married your cousin's widow so quickly. Didn't even wait a full year. With her record, you'll be having kids like clockwork. A child a year." "But you'd better be careful," I warned. "You're not some rural farmhand. You're a public employee. You're still bound by the family planning policy." "If her IUD doesn't work," I added with mock sympathy, "maybe you should consider a vasectomy." "I've already quit my job," David said stiffly. "I'm not going to be held hostage by that title for the rest of my life. Let them gossip back in the village all they want. If anyone's embarrassed, it won't just be me." "Well, now I really don't understand," I said, tilting my head. "You're willing to give up your job for this. Why did you marry your cousin's widow?" I asked. "Don't tell me it was love." "Well, we already had a child together," David said. "How could there not be some feelings?" "Shiyun, I only ever loved you, whether you believe it or not." "Then do me a favor," I said coldly. "Stop loving me. Your love makes me sick. Don't insult the word love anymore." "Shiyun, is there really no hope for us?" he asked. I'm not a junk collector, I snapped. I don't pick up garbage like you. It was the first time I couldn't hold back and finally lashed out. After moving into my new place, my mood lifted, the environment was better, and my writing reached a whole new level. I used my salary for daily expenses. The money from my writing and rental income went straight into renovating my properties. Over the course of 3 or 4 years, I fully renovated all 10 apartments. During that time, I also finished my bachelor's degree while working and successfully got into grad school. I chose to take an unpaid leave to study full-time. Back when I was in school, I had a fleeting thought. Maybe I could find some young, attractive man and try to get pregnant. But I stopped myself. A person shouldn't go down crooked paths to get what they want. If you desire something, you should pursue it openly and honestly. Otherwise, you end up like David, wanting a child, wanting a beautiful, virtuous wife, and in the end, ruining everything and trapping himself in a mess of his own making. He was once ambitious and driven, but ended up quitting his job and diving into business just to escape the consequences. That, in itself, was a punishment. And yet after 2 lifetimes, I still hadn't shaken the longing. I still wanted a child. But I didn't want to scheme my way to one. So I started going on blind dates, the proper way. I met all kinds of people. Some liked me. I liked some of them. But never once did I meet someone where the feeling was mutual and we were truly compatible. After finishing grad school, I got a job at a publishing house. There was a joint mixer between our company and the military. I didn't want to go, but I got dragged along anyway. That's where I met Ethan Shue, a man of few words. He was nothing like David, who had always been refined and smooth. Ethan was like a sword, cold, sharp, unyielding. The way he looked at people was like staring down the barrel of a gun. One wrong move, and you'd be done. But after 2 lifetimes, I wasn't afraid of anything, not even death. So I met his gaze, smiled, and danced with him like nothing was out of the ordinary. Later, my supervisor asked me what I thought of Officer Shue. "He's fine," I said simply. I wasn't looking for love or a perfect marriage. I just wanted a child. Ethan told me he was a soldier and duty came first, that he wouldn't be able to spend much time at home. That was music to my ears. By the 3rd time we met, I accepted his proposal. After we married, I found out he had once been engaged. His fiancée had died in the line of duty. He loved her deeply. And me? I was just an ordinary woman. Maybe even a little foolish. I could never compare to a heroic woman like her, and I didn't intend to. I knew, for the rest of his life, he'd never truly love me. But that was fine. All I wanted was a child. If he stayed loyal to his late fiancée in spirit, that was perfect. It meant he'd never betray our marriage. 1 year after the wedding, I got pregnant. I was already 37, officially a high-risk pregnancy. Ethan couldn't be there to help, so I hired a housekeeper. One thing was certain. I would never shortchange myself again, and I certainly wouldn't shortchange my child. I took another unpaid leave from work. During pregnancy, I studied from home. After giving birth, I started my PhD while raising my baby. Once I earned my doctorate, I stayed on as a university professor. That gave me more time to be with my child. After 2 lifetimes, I finally had a child of my own. How could I possibly let anyone else raise them for me? Ethan wanted to name the baby Emery. We had a huge fight about it. I mocked him and said, "So you want to use a child you had with another woman to honor your dead fiancée? Aren't you afraid she'll come back from the grave out of anger?" He shot me a cold glare, then turned and walked away without a word. I named the baby Julian, hoping his future would be filled with brilliance and that his life would be peaceful and smooth. Julian was a beautiful baby. His eyes were bright, his nose delicate, but his eyebrows, they were all Ethan, long and sharp like blades. Every morning he loved to touch my face while he woke up. If his little fingers couldn't find me, he'd burst into tears. But all I felt was joy. With a child like him, who needed a man, let Ethan go chase medals and honor. Ethan spent less than 2 weeks a year at home. When Julian turned 3, Ethan asked me to relocate with the military, to live on base. I refused. When Julian was 6, Ethan was transferred to a larger military district and arranged for my job transfer as well. This time, I didn't say no. Ethan was not the type to pamper or coddle anyone. If it rained, he wouldn't think to bring an umbrella. If I had menstrual cramps, he wouldn't even mutter the usual drink some hot water nonsense. When it was just me and the baby, I didn't care. But with him around, suddenly I did start to care. Turns out, I still had expectations, but those expectations slowly faded with the passing days. There really is no such thing as a perfect life, and when Ethan continued treating me coldly, I stopped trying to understand or accommodate him. I didn't care about appearances anymore. I hired a housekeeper to take care of everything, his meals, his laundry, his errands, all of it. Ethan wasn't happy about it. He didn't like strangers in the house. I told him, I don't like strangers in the house either, but I also need time to read, to write, to talk with our son. When you come home, all you do is eat and maybe play with Julian for a bit. What else do you bring to this house? I'm your wife, Ethan, not your maid. After that, Ethan actually tried. He started helping around the house. He wasn't stupid. It didn't take long before he had the chores down to a science. Eventually, we let the housekeeper go and managed the home together. As for Julian, we raised him with full attention, a perfect blend of intellect and discipline. I taught him music, chess, calligraphy, and literature. Ethan took him running and trained him in military drills and physical fitness. Under our care, Julian grew into a well-rounded, exceptional young man, strong in character, mind, and heart. Time flew by like a white horse galloping past a crack in the wall. Before I knew it, Julian was 14. Ethan and I had developed that settled rhythm of old married couples. Every now and then, he'd rub my shoulders when I sat too long at my desk, or quietly drape a blanket over me when I fell asleep reading. I think, over time, our quiet life had nurtured a quiet love. After all, I spent years gathering herbal recipes and medicinal wine to ease the pain in his joints and bones. When I saw David again and thought of all the things that once were, it felt like a distant dream. It had been over 10 years since I last returned to my hometown. Not long after our divorce, my family started lining up blind dates for me, all in the name of doing what was best for me. It didn't matter how terrible the man was, they just wanted me married off quickly. That way, people would stop gossiping. That way, I'd move out and free up the house for my dear nephew's wedding. I couldn't understand how people could be so calculating, and I had no desire to keep getting entangled with them. After getting accepted into grad school, I sold my house. Once I graduated, I made one quick trip back to transfer my work documents from the old office. That was it. From then on, I never went back. I simply wired money and sent gifts for holidays and my parents' birthdays. I didn't even tell them when I remarried. I cut ties cleanly with everyone from my old life. Seeing David again caught me completely off guard. The years had changed him. Too much alcohol, too much pleasure, too many worldly pursuits. They had all left their mark. His face still bore a trace of the man I used to know, but his aura, his spirit, it was completely different. "You've gotten old," he said. "Who doesn't?" I replied. "But you've aged beautifully, exactly the way I pictured you would." He gave a sad smile. "I always thought I'd grow old the same way. But look at me now, I'm a mess." David lowered his gaze, his expression clouded. I smiled faintly and said, "You don't look bad now either, kind of like a big shot. Plenty of people would kill for what you have." "It's all just for show," he said with a weary laugh. "It's been ages since I've had a good night's sleep." Now he was getting sentimental. I had no interest in hearing any of it, so I changed the subject. "Are you here to talk business?" "No, I didn't come for that." He hesitated. "Would you like to grab a coffee with me?" "I need to help my son with his homework," I replied, politely turning him down. He glanced at Julian and asked, "Is this your daughter? She's beautiful." For some reason, there was a strange heat in his eyes. I had Julian greet him politely, then quickly said goodbye. "I've got things to take care of, we'll be heading out." Julian was curious about our interaction. "Mom, who was that? Why didn't you want to talk to him? Didn't you say you were going to help me with my homework?" "Just someone I used to know," I said casually. "If you won't tell me, I'll ask Dad to interrogate you," he threatened, half playful, half serious. "Your dad doesn't care about stuff like that," I replied confidently. But I was wrong. That night, after we turned off the lights, Ethan asked Julian, "So you ran into someone familiar today? He wanted to talk to your mom, but she didn't seem too interested?" "It was David," I said from the dark. My ex-husband. There's nothing to talk about with him." Ethan said nothing more. But just as I was about to fall asleep, he asked quietly, "Have you really let it go?" I didn't respond. I just pretended to be asleep. That night passed without incident. The next morning, for the first time in forever, Ethan offered to drive me to work. We'd been married for over a decade, and I could count on one hand the number of times he'd done something like that. Maybe, just maybe, he did care a little. I was overwhelmed by a mix of emotions, a flicker of happiness, quickly followed by sadness, and then something even heavier, a quiet kind of grief. Despite it all, David still found me after class. By the lakeside, where the willows swayed in the breeze, he sighed deeply. "The first time I saw you was during that spring retreat." "It wasn't by the lake," I corrected him silently in my mind. "It was up on the mountain." "You were standing at the railing, looking out into the distance," he continued. "Your dress flowing in the wind, the mountains as your backdrop, your face glowing with joy." My heart skipped a beat. All I could think was, "God, she's beautiful." Now, here we are, decades later. We're not young anymore. I said nothing, unsure of his purpose. He seemed to notice my silence, and with a self-deprecating smile, he said, "I'm moving overseas. At first, I wanted to ask if you'd come with me. I thought maybe I could spend the rest of my life making it up to you, but clearly, that's not going to happen." He looked at me with rare seriousness. "Shuyun, I'm sorry. Please take care of yourself." "Safe travels," I said, eager to get this plague out of my life. I didn't tell Ethan about this meeting. Maybe he would have cared. Maybe he wouldn't. Either way, I didn't want to dwell on it. He once asked if I'd let go. But what about him? Had he? He never forgot his late fiancée's birthday or the anniversary of her death. Yet in all those years, he'd never remembered my birthday. Not even once. The truth is, we shouldn't dig too deep into each other's hearts. It's better not to ask, not to know. So I pretended not to notice when Ethan crossed certain lines. I pretended not to see the cold look on his face. We both just let it slide. And for a while, it did slide. Until 3 months later, when the police came knocking on our door to question me about my 2 recent meetings with David. That bastard had gotten me into trouble. After some digging, I finally learned what happened. After marrying that other woman, he even had a daughter. A full set. A son and a daughter. But neither of his children met a good end. His son got lured into drugs and eventually died in a rehab center. His daughter was smart and full of life. She had even gotten into a top university just last year. But she drowned in the river over summer break. David fell into despair. He gave up on his business, liquidated all his assets, and moved abroad. Not long after that, one by one, his stepchildren, all those so-called sons and daughters from that woman, began running into misfortune. One after another, they died under mysterious circumstances. Some said that David's son and daughter had been set up by those stepchildren, and that later he took revenge for them. If that's true, it was nothing but a brutal dog-eat-dog cycle. Thinking back, it made a twisted kind of sense. His cousin's family had used every trick in the book to manipulate and trap him into forming an alliance with them. They were never good people to begin with. And David? He was nothing but a schemer too, manipulative, calculating, the kind of man who spent a whole lifetime playing games with people. In my past life, I'd been one of his pawns. With 2 camps of master manipulators like that, what good could possibly come of it? I told Ethan everything I'd found out. I was afraid David, with his twisted bitterness, would try to hurt Julian out of spite. Ethan tried to sound calm, brushing it off like it wasn't a big deal. But from that day forward, he personally drove me and Julian everywhere. If he couldn't do it himself, he arranged for someone to do it. He was terrified of something happening to us, especially an accident. Fortunately, David hadn't gone completely insane. He didn't drag innocent people into his mess, and he didn't try to blame his misfortune on me. 1 year passed, then 2, then 3, 4, and eventually 5. Ethan retired, Julian got into college. Everything was still good, still intact. But Ethan never dared let his guard down. After all, David's daughter had drowned during the summer after her college entrance exams. That detail haunted him. It made him edgy, tense, paranoid. His constant anxiety began to affect me too. I couldn't help feeling uneasy. So that entire summer, Julian and I stayed inside the compound. We didn't step outside the house, didn't leave the yard. For her safety and for her future, we helped her choose a university with the strictest of management and high-level confidentiality. It was her choice too, and we respected that. When we finally watched her step through those university gates, Ethan and I both let out a long, deep breath of relief. But still, a small knot of worry lingered in my chest. I'd wake in the middle of the night in a cold sweat, afraid something might happen to her too. It wasn't until many years later, when I heard that David had suffered a stroke and died after failing to get medical help in time, and that the woman had thrown herself into the river and drowned,